Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where our purpose is to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve your organisation sustainably. Learn how to achieve and sustain an excellence journey for yourself, others, and the planet.
I'm your host, Brad Jennings, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. Welcome to episode 11 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. It is such a pleasure to have Dr. Keivan Zokaei with me. Keivan is an expert in business transformation, working with industries ranging from retail and manufacturing through to financial services. Keivan co-authored the award-winning book, Creating a Lean and Green Business System, which outlines the approaches taken by a number of our leading businesses to develop a culture of continuous improvement focused on achieving holistic outcomes for people, profit, and the planet. Keivan is here today to share his recent studies and work supporting organisations in the field of happiness. He is truly a person who has dedicated his career to creating a better future. Let's get into the episode. I've got with me today Dr. Keivan Zokaei, expert in all things enterprise excellence, author of the book Creating a Lean and Green Business System, and we're here today to talk about happiness and excellence and the part the two play together to truly achieve greatness in an organisation. Keivan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to you, Brad. And
Thanks,
good morning from a sunny London.
Yeah. Keivan, before we get fully into the conversation around happiness and excellence and the part the two play together, do you mind telling us what, in your backstory, what set you on a path around the topic of happiness and also the topic of enterprise excellence?
Of course. So I have to say sheer stroke of good luck on both accounts, happiness and enterprise excellence. Well, happiness, in fact, happened only maybe around 6 years ago or so. But I have to rather embarrassingly have a moment of confession and admit that I had resisted it maybe subconsciously for a very long time. In fact, I remember as a 12-year-old, I had a great teacher who influenced me for better a lot. And the same teacher asked me to write an essay on happiness. And I was thinking to myself, in a world full of vanity, in a world full of misery, it's complete vanity to write about your own happiness. And I have to add to it a little bit about my own personal story. I am Iranian, so this happened in 1980s. It would have been late 1980s in Tehran when this teacher asked me to write about happiness. And if you think about it, it was a country going through a war. It would have been just coming out of it or towards the end of it. And you could see a lot of poverty and misery and problems. And of course, theocracy, dictatorship, that sort of thing that had happened at the time. And, there was clearly room for a lot of improvement, let's say, using the continuous improvement language.
So, Keivan, you were living in this country where all sorts of crazy and terrible things were going down. And you had a teacher getting you to write about happiness.
Happiness, yes. And I thought, oh God, I mean, that surely is just vanity, and that surely is wrong. And I cannot, like any 12-year-old with lots of altruistic ideas, I was thinking to myself, oh, surely I am not going to sit here and define my own happiness to myself and think about my own happiness. That is surely wrong. And of course, it took me maybe 30 years since there or thereabouts to actually realize that is in fact the most important thing. That is in fact the most important currency in anyone's life. And that is the one subject that is worth writing about and thinking about.
And Keivan, what was that trigger point 6 years ago that made you pull it all together and go, wow, actually what that teacher was talking to me about all those years ago is actually highly relevant?
And I have to say that I had forgotten all about it. And I have to also admit that one essay was one essay that I never submitted. So, and many years later, I had gone to work in academia, and after that work as a management consultant, and I was consulting to an international firm who have, in fact, offices all around Australia as well. And the global HR director pulled me, who is a great friend, by the way. I'll name her Dolores. And Dolores pulls me to the side and says, well, you talk about the why behind doing improvement, right? I said, yes, that's the most important thing. You should know your why. And I gave my usual consulting spiel on it. That's really important. If you don't know your why, then you can't really do much on your continuous improvement journey. And then she says, well, so what is the why behind this lean thing that you keep banging on about? And well, of course, I could have given her the standard answer and all of that, but I sunk for a second. I had that sort of sinking feeling for a second, because I think she hit a chord with me at that moment. And I was, okay, now hang on a moment. I'm not really able to answer that question, because surely your personal well-being, your authentic happiness is the question here. Everybody's authentic happiness. That was the moment that I realized that around this, so I can't say was it that very second or maybe hours later that it came to me that I'd resisted writing this essay on happiness many years ago, and I realized, oh, oops, okay, I probably have missed a very important topic, and I better go and think about it and read up on it now.
Wow,
so that's the story, yeah.
So that trigger point of Dolores talking to you about that really brought an aha moment.
Yes, it did. As it is for most of us, you need that sort of that aha moment, maybe a small wake-up call, maybe a friend challenging you in the nicest possible way, in the safest possible way. And I think she challenged me in a very friendly way, and she was, but what's the, and I have to now admit that we go to organizations and we say, oh, you have to improve. And we go to all these great employees who work in those organizations, and we offer them continuous improvement toolkits, and we offer them really sometimes fairly complicated continuous improvement systems. And we also talk about why in the spirit of what Simon Sinek talks about, know your own why. But do we really talk about the why, which is your own selfish happiness? And there is nothing wrong with being selfish, by the way. In fact, it's the healthiest thing you can do. If you're all selfish in a healthy way, we can help each other, and we'll create a much happier and better world, of course, altogether.
Yeah, too true, too true. Keivan, I want to come back to this piece on happiness and the power it can provide to a continuous improvement or an excellence journey. But how did you go from Iran to become a consultant and best-selling, award-winning author in London?
Well, so I did my undergrad studies in a good university in Tehran, and I went to get a job in oil and gas industry, a good job and a middle-class job with some good future. And I decided to, it was my dad, in fact, who nagged me. He studied at Imperial College in London back in the 70s, and he nagged me and funded me to go and do a master's degree. And I went to do a master's degree at Warwick University in the UK, a very good place to study. And I got introduced to very interesting professors and very interesting subjects. And I did my master's degree dissertation on lean and green, as it happened. So that was the beginning of a bit of a journey. So when I was doing my research on lean and green, and bearing in mind that this is 2001, 2002, and in my research I came across a newsletter that Jim Womack had put out. In fact, I think I'm not sure if I had contacted him and then he put out the newsletter, or just after he had put out the newsletter. I have a copy of that newsletter to date. And the newsletter talks about lean, and the concept of lean still is very fresh. And he's talking about lean is also going to deliver some sustainability benefits. Lean is also green. And in conversation with Jim Womack, he said, well, I have my co-author and colleague Dan Jones, who is nearer to you. Why don't you contact him and ask his opinion? And by the way, he has different opinions, because quite rightly so, Dan was saying that, well, be careful. Lean doesn't always lead to sustainable benefits. In fact, in many cases, if you're not careful and conscious, it leads to the opposite. And it's true to date, we know that. So when I contacted Dan, it led to one of his colleagues coming up to Warwick for a meeting, and during the meeting, they offered me a job. Wow. And the job was come here to Lean Enterprise Center at Cardiff University for a year or two and go back to your old job. And famous last few words. And we're like 17 years on, and I'm still doing the same thing. And what a great place to be, Lurk, because rubbing shoulder with some of the greatest minds in the world of continuous improvement. You had the likes of Peter Hines, Dan Jones, John Bicino, John Darlington, Nick Rich, you name it, a dozen brilliant minds. They all influenced me, and it was fantastic research. I have to say, one piece of research that I had gone there to do was Lean and Green, and that was the one piece of research that took 6 years until we had a proper project to work on Lean and Green finally, because the industry was very interested to fund Lean projects, of course, and we had to, under the radar, think about the sustainability benefits. A lot of researchers at Lurk were interested in that, but it was always under the radar.
Yeah. Well, you certainly ended up with some good names that you were working on that resulted in that book, Creating a Lean and Green Business System. Marks and Spencer's, Tesco's. I really enjoyed reading it and have read it multiple times since. But Keivan, it seems to me like you've always been working in the field of happiness and excellence, because from what I see, even Lean and Green, that environmental purpose and to make a bigger difference, I've seen that bring happiness to so many organizations, but then also inspire them to move on to bigger and better things.
Well, I hadn't thought of it that way, but you could be right. I think you are right. In fact, they're all one and the same thing. It's difficult to distinguish between them.
Yeah, and it's been very unique, your career, in that what you've worked with has been higher level, higher mastery, that focus on the environmental to achieve excellence at the same time. Now we're talking about happiness and focusing on human happiness and using that to help drive an excellence journey. What is the secret to that? What are the key ingredients you've found to truly harness happiness of your people to then help you achieve excellence as an organization?
Well, I wish I had a quick answer for that, but I try my best to. Maybe that's actually a very interesting question, and maybe a very big question too. I have to say, organizations who successfully go on the transformation journey, they definitely know their why. That's for sure, and they know their why in a way that relates to each individual that is around there. So, and these are not just for-profit organizations. Some of them are not-for-profit organizations. They connect to people's why, personal raison d'être, successfully. And I'm not sure if I am answering your question, but here is my experience. Those individuals get a kick out of the day job. So we know that profit and growth are the consequence of the focus, the overt focus, not just covert focus, the overt focus on the purpose. You and I were talking about Autolift the other day. I think that's you worked for Autolift, Brad, didn't you?
Yeah, worked with Autolift, yeah.
Yes, and you told me that Autolift know their purpose. We save lives. And this is of course, just for the listeners, this is a company that manufactures airbags, and in the right moment that is saving someone's life. So you were telling me, and maybe you could share that too. Now I am asking you the question, Brad.
No problem.
Yes.
Kevin, down, when I was working with Autoliv, which was down in their plant in Victoria in Australia, every employee knew that purpose, and that purpose inspired them every day. It inspired them to ensure they're producing the highest quality. It inspired them to bring up ideas. And I think you're exactly right when you say that the secret's happiness. Because working for an organization that had a purpose like that brought them happiness, that happiness brought motivation, and that motivation led to continuous improvement in all aspects of the organization.
Absolutely. And something that has been bothering me and it's on my mind in the recent years is the fact that as we automate and as we robo-source, so robots and automation replaces humans, we're not just creating a potential economic issue. More importantly, I think, because the economic issue we can deal with, we know that we've always been in where machines replace humans for the past couple of decades since the Industrial Revolution. It's past couple of centuries, since the Industrial Revolution, and we've always dealt with it. I think we will continue to deal with that economically. But what about the social aspect? The fact that jobs give people purpose. We need more positive jobs, like companies like Autoliv. We don't have nearly enough of them out there. A job is just a job. We hear that expression a lot. Every time I hear that expression, it's just a job, I cringe because life's too short.
And we spend a lot of time at work.
And you're spending 8 to 10 hours easily at work. And if you include commute, it will be more than that. I wish we could, and then you'd be sleeping 8 hours a day. So what's left to us?
Yeah, it's a big part of our lives.
Absolutely.
Keivan, if we had a leader here now and he was going, okay, I want to look at ways to bring happiness into my workplace, and I want to be able to create that inspiration to create a culture of continuous improvement, where would you tell him or her to start? What advice would you give them?
Well, I might start telling her, make your peace with the word happiness. Because, like Keivan 12-year-old, it is a word that we don't always make our peace with. So it comes across a little bit like happy and chirpy, like cheerfulness.
Yeah.
It's not about that, of course. It's about being grounded and being connected, knowing yourself. In fact, the best exercise the gurus in the field of happiness tell you to do is to meditate. That's the one technique that all the gurus tell you will bring you happiness in short space of time, maybe in about 21 days, in fact, scientifically proven, by the way. Now, maybe she needs to consider what is really happiness, or genuine happiness, authentic happiness, well-being, and make their peace with it. And the fact that that's, even money, when you have money, is a promise of happiness in the future, because that's all it is. We are going to buy comfort and convenience and cheerfulness and relaxation with that money. It's a bill that brings you happiness in the future. So make your peace with that concept and put it at the core of everything you do. So in a way that is very obvious and simple, making it, and you have to go through all of that complexity to reach that simplicity. Make it simple and accessible for everybody.
Yeah, so Keivan, if I hear you right, you're saying it really needs to start with that leader, and they need to make peace and find that place of happiness and calmness themselves. And from there, they can then really take a direction to help their people and help the broader organization.
I would say it's really important for the leadership to do it. I wouldn't say if it needs to start with them. It's much better if it started with them. But we have seen how influential an individual can be. A single individual, and we all have stories of Fred who worked on the shop floor, and we all know who Fred is, and we went to Fred and said, well, today I'm having a bad day, give me some inspiration. We obviously didn't use those words, but we all know who Fred is and who to go to. We need more Freds, really, quite frankly. And by the way, Freds in this world are doing it in spite of the environment. That's the amazing thing about them. In a metal bashing environment, I know a Fred, if you like, who everybody knows that Fred is a source of inspiration. And everybody knows that Fred is the one person you go to if you want some wisdom and some advice. And I think we don't have to wait for the leadership to do it. We can all be a Fred.
That's a good point. Keivan, you've inspired so many people throughout your career and the books you've written. Who have been some people that have inspired and motivated you?
Oh, long list. How much time do we have? But I have to say, Hunter Lovins has been a great influencer, and I have the honor to call her a friend now. The book Natural Capitalism, of course, a best-selling book back in 1999, 2000s. At the turn of the century. And I think the idea that you can marry capitalism with sustainability, the idea that you can fix the world as we have it today is based on capitalism. The idea that you can fix it is a very powerful idea. The fact that we have to fix it, we have no doubt about it. But what are the alternatives? To fight it, to ditch it? If I may share another personal story, one of the first books possibly the first book I went into Warwick University's library to search for was Urban Guerrilla by Che Guevara. It was banned in Iran, of course it was, and I was just curious to read it. And that day I came out of the library with a couple of books, and one of them was actually Natural Capitalism. What a great book when you read it and say, I remember the first chapter, and you can't put it down. I think, wow. So you've got a choice here to try to be a force for good, and actually everything is eminently fixable, or you can just be a bit miserable about it and try to fight back. And I think I made my peace with the idea. So, okay, let's try to fix this.
Keivan, has that been a key motivator for you throughout your career? And what other motivators have really kept you in this industry of continuous improvement, which I know can be really tough at times?
It can be tough, as you and I both know, Brad. It can be a lonely place sometimes when, you do that. I get inspiration every day from all these continuous improvement champions, all these change champions, transformation champions out there. They know who they are. And you asking me about the moments or the actual people who are inspiring me?
The inspirational elements that you see day to day that really keep you going, get you up the next morning and get you out there again.
So for me, of course, maybe rather selfishly, is when you have people come and say, well, this actually has changed something for me. And I have been able to deliver X, Y, and Z, especially if you know that they mean it and there's a bit of a backstory, personal backstory behind it. That is absolutely marvelous to come across. These are, sometimes I'm longing to read something like that. One that is stuck in my mind was 2010 in China, and a Chinese engineer wrote, "Oh well, now we see the business. Oh, sorry, we see the factory that's in our factory."
Yeah, true.
And that sort of thing.
Well, it's a really nice motivative purpose, and I think if you're in continuous improvement, seeing others grow and develop is a really powerful thing, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's the best thing you can possibly ask for is when people go on their own normative journey and their own experiences in their own way, which is absolutely unique and ingenious. That's the whole point, is that, and they come and explain to you what happened there. That is marvelous.
What are some key elements that an organization can take back and really put into practice to try and create more happiness and excellence within their organization? What are the 3 top things you would give them as advice?
Ooh. Um, well, so it's probably knowing yourself, um, and knowing your customer is these are cliche almost, but these are very, very important. It's incredible how difficult it can be truly to know yourself and to know your customer, and then of course to bridge the gap between those two elements is very important. What we do see a lot is that companies have no shortage of smart. Companies have loads of very good ideas around. And there is no shortage of good tools and techniques for improvement. In fact, if anything, we have way too much. So there is no problem there. But how to systematically bring these together, and the how is, as you and I have been discussing before, Brad, too, the how is sometimes missing. In many, many cases, it's missing. And the reason is missing is that because we don't know our why very well. So it goes back to that story. In fact, if I had to hazard a guess, I would say maybe 80% of the organizations out there are not fulfilling their potentials. That is unfortunate. That's way too many organizations, way too many people out there. And the 20% that are on the journey to fulfill their potentials, there is an 80-20 there as well. So maybe only 20% of the 20%, 4% are really truly going towards the excellence part. And those companies for sure have gone past the what and the smart tools and techniques that is around them. They have connected with a systematic way of connecting the people and processes and align it to their purpose. Now, even better, they have discovered their timeless values. That again, you and I have been discussing, Brad, and these are inspired by, of course, authentic happiness and continuous improvement, so on and so forth. So they know what are the personal values and timeless values, and then they know their core purpose. What's their why? Why are they going on that journey?
Wow, there's a bit to it, but where would you advise people to go look to be able to find some more information on that topic you're talking about there, on how to truly lead an organization to excellence through building greater happiness?
I have to say there is absolutely no shortage of good material out there. I would for sure, I think most people have already, but if someone hasn't, I would for sure go and watch Simon Sinek's video, the famous 8 minutes video on YouTube that has been watched tens of millions of times, and maybe watch it again and again. And a lot of good organizations are getting inspiration from the idea of golden circle and all sorts of good ideas that Simon Sinek. And by the way, the whole idea of the infinite game. Are we in it for a finite game? Is there a win-lose here? Or no, actually, this is business is an infinite game of win, 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 and thinking long-term and strategic. If a leader is in a place that is looking for genuine transformation, also bear in mind that's a very privileged place to be. Many, many leaders don't get to be there. So if you're privileged enough to be in that space and genuinely think about it, wow, you're very lucky. And also I applaud the fact that you've managed to be there.
It's a real achievement, isn't it?
Yes, it's a great achievement.
Yeah, Keivan, final question. What have you learnt recently that you haven't known before? What's been a recent insight you've come across?
Well, it has to be something to do with COVID-19, isn't it, Brad?
Yeah.
We had a child a month or so before COVID-19 broke. And so I have learned two things. One is how precarious our lives were. Things that we take absolutely for granted. So if you and I, Brad, we are traveling consultants and we're constantly on the road, on a plane, and how much we're taking this for granted. In fact, I was supposed to be on a plane to Australia just around the time that we went into a lockdown. So you can imagine what a great impact it might have on you and on all of us. on absolutely everybody who wasn't impacted by COVID-19. So it taught me a great lesson And at the same time, when I look at my 6-month-old baby, for him, nothing has changed in this world. Yet to him, this is absolutely normal.
Yeah.
So when you marry the two, this huge change that is so normal to a 6-month-old, this is such a sobering message that it sends me.
It's been dramatic, hasn't it? But it's such a great story you tell there from your 6-month-old child that this is normal to us, that we've been through dramatic changes.
It's incredible. It also shows how much humans have the ability to adapt to the circumstances.
It's amazing. Keivan, the part too, I guess, in times like this, happiness is even more important, to keep that personal happiness and understand that and focus on that as amongst everything else. Because I guess, like you said, COVID has showed us that there's so many things that we did and spent our time on and we're worried about that really is inconsequential compared to what we've seen in the last 6 months.
Absolutely, they are.
Yeah. Keivan, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate your time. And thank you for sharing knowledge and insights around happiness and excellence, lean and green, your amazing story of your career and your life through. And I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Brad, for very interesting and intelligent questions. You got me to think a lot during the whole conversation we had. So thank you for your time as well and for having me.
Thanks, Keivan. What a great episode from Dr. Keivan Zokaei on the topic of happiness and the importance of that in the workplace. The key points I took from this episode was to start with yourself as a leader. And then the second that I took was really to define your vision and purpose and let other teams and people put it into their own language. So the key steps I'd see for that, from a leadership point of view, and Keivan mentioned, was really focus on getting yourself right with sleep, food, exercise, meditation, mindfulness, all these key aspects to really get us in a great place as a leadership, which helps us then lead happiness throughout the organisation. And with vision and mission, or just cause and purpose, I really take that the key steps can be to define that as an organisation in a way that has a bigger purpose to it, and then take that to the teams and help them define it in their language, and then down to the individual. This is a really powerful approach that I've seen done in a number of organisations and can really help. I hope you all gained a lot of value from this episode, and thank you again, Dr. Keivan Zokaei.